Welcome back, Doom fans. Lazygamer here. Today, let's talk more about difficulty and item placements in Doom. While one is hard-coded into the game and the second is really up to you as the mapmaker, we should cover the basics of what all that means inside the game. I would just like to say that this is how I understand them, by what I have learned and experienced. Do not take anything I say as gospel, and if something I say is clearly wrong, feel free to correct me in the comments. I am fairly new to this, and everyone can make mistakes or misunderstand things. But let's get started anyway. Most, if not all, are aware of these difficulty settings, if you are at all familiar with classic Doom. They have some variety on console ports, I think, but if you are a mapmaker, we are going with the PC version. But what does that entail exactly? I will cover the basic differences of each difficulty setting first, and then we will go into the builder and discuss what it means in practice. Just as a side note, this all applies to classic Doom or Doom 2 and their variants. Any mods, like Brutal Doom for instance, changes the factors to some degree. You should still know vanilla so you can make appropriate changes if you are making maps based around that or other mods. The first thing to notice in this setting is that all ammo drops double their yield. That is to say, the shells that usually give 4 now gives 8 shells, one single rocket gives 2, and so on. The enemies also only do half the damage to the player, which makes any level easier to complete by new gamers. Yes, even today, 25 years after the game came out. As far as I'm aware, enemies take the same amount of damage on all 5 difficulty settings though. As for balance, when starting placements, there are usually more than average amount of items like ammo and health, and less than average amount of enemies. If it has any modern equivalent, this would maybe be the story mode, though Doom has not much of that as a rule. This is probably what other games would call the easy mode. There are still the same amount of enemies and items, but their drops are normal. 4 shells gives 4 shells, and 1 rocket is only 1 rocket. Enemies give normal damage, and otherwise nothing should change much here. This is the medium or normal difficulty setting. The game will default to this if the player actively does not change this in the menu. This should be the most balanced setting with the average placement of items and enemies, so add a scattering of more enemies and or change a couple of lower tier enemies to a more powerful version. For example, of 3 former humans, 1 can become a shotgun guy for instance. But again, this is up to you, the mapmaker. This is the hard difficulty. Add more enemies here that should not appear at all on lower settings, and or replace some lower tier enemies again with harder ones. I would mostly leave the item count the same, maybe remove the occasional health item or ammo placement. But the difficulty should be with the enemy placements. Again, ammo drops double here, but that might not help much since the enemies and some enemy projectiles are faster and all enemies respawn after a set time. This is more difficult by default, and you should not really mess with placements or enemies or items unless you want to make it slightly easier or if you are a real sadist. The game code takes care of the very hard parts really. Alright, So here is a room you might find in a typical map. We'll use this to demonstrate. Be aware that this room will be filled with what might be more than a typical load, but we'll just have this room, so be aware that you might need to spread things out a bit more. But you are, in the end, are the map maker and can make your map however you please, so this is just an example. Again, when you do your own map, you can make your own technique about how you do things. I usually don't do things exactly like this either, but today we'll work from the ground up. That is to say, we'll start with the easiest difficulty and work our way up. That way we should avoid making too much of a mess to clean up later. So, Too Young to Die it is. Let's go. So let's start with the enemies, shall we? So things mode, right click to where the first enemy will be. Since this is easy mode, let's hide him around the corner. Let's face him this way. Yeah, I did some experimenting, so it's already selected. You probably not have that, but let's start with former human. Now, as for difficulty placement, once again, these are not relevant. These do not matter. This is only a single player map, but you might just leave them there anyway. Those as well, I just removed them so they don't complicate stuff. There are some things here. We will leave that for the moment as well. It doesn't really matter. Difficulty is what we're about today. This enemy will appear on all difficulty settings. So let's leave everything as it is and press OK. And now, if you are by yourself, you could just control copy it and put it wherever you want. I will add one more enemy, but we will do it manually, so repeat actions and all that. Anyway, when you place a new one, if you copy paste or not, the last actions you created will be copied over. That's why copy and pasting isn't always that good when you just want to put one extra enemy and you just choose one at random and copy paste it, and then it was created for the hardest difficulty or the easiest, and it doesn't show up when you try to test it on normal. But in this case, this is what we want, so that's okay. While we are in here, let's start also placing what we might call health items and such. So let's see, what can we do? Stimpak. Let's put in. Let's assume this is a bit out in your map. This is not the start area. You have probably met some enemies, so we could use health pack. Put it here. Let's make sure that this shows up on all difficulty settings. Let's put one more Here we will do some changes though, and we will remove the 3 highest difficulty settings. So this will only show up on easy and very easy and easy. So if I play on normal, I will only get this. This, however, if I should play on normal or hard, I will get stim pack instead. I'm gonna place it just about where the other one is. Let's move it slightly so we can see both. This is about how it will look like. And none of them will appear or should appear on skill 5, which is insanely hard. Though we will have this one, because this will appear on all difficulty settings. Now let's put as a reward up here. Let's just put in green armor for these difficulties, and a blue armor for the lowest difficulties. Now, here is the obvious secret area. There will be an ambush here, but not for the lowest difficulty settings. I will explain more about this later. We will, however, place a power-up in here. No, 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 no. This thing. This will be accessible for all players technically, but I have plans to let the enemy that triggers this will be a player that appears just on easy and above, and this is very easy, so the players that chooses the lower difficulties will not open this. So with that, we will leave the lowest difficulty, and we will go up to the second lowest difficulty. Now, again, I am going to add another. Let's go back to monsters. Form a human. He will not appear in the lowest difficulty, neither will he appear other than here, because I will replace it with a third thing. Higher up. However, we will give him an action. This has nothing to do with the difficulty of any sort. I'm just playing with the map. Well, it sort of has, but you do not have to do this at all. This is just me playing. Like I was making a map, in fact. So I'm gonna add an action, or a script actually, that will open this, hopefully when he dies. So that's a death trigger. We'll open this. And we will add one imp in here. And that will appear on all difficulties. No actions, just not the lowest one. Actually, should probably be in here to protect this valuable item, obviously. All right, so we made things slightly more difficult. So we'll go to the medium difficulty, where I will copy this, make sure we only select this one, right click, and make sure that it will appear on the 3 difficulties that left. Make sure it does the same thing. And we will replace it with former sergeant shotgun guy. And make sure everything's right. Make sure only this is selected. Then we can copy and paste one up here. Then just face this way. Now how far did we go again? We are at 3 and above. I think we're going to the 4th difficulty settings now. We have done our items, enemies. So here I think we'll just put in one more imp in here. Remove it from those. And we'll replace let's just add. Let's just add another sergeant, which will only appear 4th and 5th difficulty setting. No actions, just to help with things. These guys will replace themselves at the different difficulty settings. Both will open this, not on the easiest difficulty, and this guy will just be there. He will appear at 2 to 5. This one will appear, why not there? I have to make a bit of a challenge. And I don't think I actually filled it up with too much stuff. And I might have fumbled a bit, but this is how you place enemies that will appear on different difficulty settings. Let's try and play them at different difficulty settings and see if it actually did anything. That's the last time I'll play anything on the two highest difficulty settings, because I suck at gaming, at least that's how it usually goes. I'm a normal player. I play normal usually. Hope you found this tutorial interesting and that it helps you make hard but fair levels for any player, and not just for very good players. In the meantime, this has been your host, the Lazygamer, logging off. Bye guys.